So how does one learn a language? Maybe it's passed down from their parents. Maybe it's taught to them through their education system. Or maybe it's forced onto them by a digital green owl that threatens to kidnap their family members. But it's safe to say that not everyone has the access to the same resources when learning their own language. In June of 2023, I visited the Native American Blackfoot Reservation with little foreknowledge of how much this single trip would end up changing my life. At that point, I had known basically nothing about linguistic death, cultural extinction, or the Blackfoot for that matter. In fact, all I knew about the reservation was that it was really, really beautiful. The glacial mountains of the Capped Range simply melt into the Great Plains with lakes dotting the scene here and there. It was truly peaceful. But the history? Not so much so. Most people know that during the 1800s, as the United States expanded west, many powers like the Blackfoot lost a lot of power politically. But a much lesser known fact is that the Blackfoot language also declined during the same period of time, that today, only around 2,900 of the 15,000 registered Blackfoot are able to speak their own language. In such a dire situation, I expected outrage. I expected community outreach. I expected people to learn the language like there's no tomorrow. But instead, I saw nothing. It was indeed as if the people and the government had little wills to revitalize a language that had once been stolen from them. Sandra, an 18-year-old high schooler whom I talked to, told me that the death of her language was partially due to the fact that the education system had failed to teach her the Blackfoot tongue. She told me the few words she knew in Blackfoot. Oki, nistunidonigu Sandra. Hello, my name is Sandra. As well as the names of a few pieces of fruit. But even then, not everyone had the same views regarding linguistic extinction in the reservation. Joe, an elder and fluent speaker of the Blackfoot whom I talked to, told me that the death of his language was sad, but indeed completely warranted. He told tales of how his grandparents were forced out of their homes into institutions such as boarding schools, forced to change their names and come back as completely new people. Imagine, he told me, if a group of foreign people had suddenly taken you from your house and beat you, sometimes to death, for daring to speak the way that you've always done. Ultimately, many of these children returned home during the winter unable to communicate using the Blackfoot tongue. Now, as scenic as the Blackfoot Reservation was, I noticed that something was missing. And on a particularly long hike along the Heart Butte Mountains, these beautiful mountains with tens of thousands of year-old trails and corns, I noticed that the missing thing was none other than a coherent culture which had lived the land for thousands of years. Despite the Blackfoot having one of the richest histories in all of Native America, dating back to 10,000 years, their biggest town of Browning looked no different than any other American settlement. Dilapidated roads, stray dogs, and rental storage trailers lay the landscape. And although the Blackfoot had one of the richest cultures in the whole of the Native America, having things such as a worship of the bison and a strong emphasis on environmental protection, their shops there were, sure, trying to sell something Native American, but not exactly Blackfoot. Why then, I wondered, had that culture gone away? I remained deep in thought for many months before eventually stumbling upon this Chinese proverb, 唇亡齿寒. Without the lips, the teeth feel cold. Indeed, as I had realized, one's language had provided a shell of protection for their culture. And if that language was gone, as in the case of the Blackfoot, then the culture would be hurt as well. This was a eureka moment for me. Now, you're also probably wondering right now why I, as a complete foreigner, would suddenly come to care about the issue of linguistic extinction. And you'd be right. I didn't grow up on the Blackfoot Reservation. I didn't spend any time in the Montanan wilderness. In fact, I grew up in the city of Beijing, a concrete jungle of 19 million people. But stepping on to that Blackfoot Reservation, seeing a language and a culture slowly disappear, I realized something. Our language and our culture is more than the words we speak or the food we eat. It's part of our identity. And when part of that identity dies, so does a part of us. So I learned to care about another's language simply because one of the only things that we humans have, which is truly universal, is our culture. Unfortunately, the story of the Blackfoot is so common around the world. I want you to now raise your hands if you think that 5% of all languages around the world are endangered. Okay, so plenty of you. Keep your hands up if you believe that the figure is 10%. What about 15%? 20%? Smart crowd. Today, 43% of all languages around the world, totaling 3,000, are at risk of going extinct. That means that if you speak around half the tongues on our beautiful planet, your culture may very well be gone. And it's important here not to get lost in the statistics. Every single dot on this map here is a language, a culture, and a people, just like the Blackfoot. And sure, while the Blackfoot may have thousands of members to carry on their tales long after they're gone, many of these individual dots have just hundreds, tens, or maybe just 2 or 3 individual speakers. And these languages are all around us as well. In the state where I reside, Massachusetts, there used to be a tribe known as the Massachusetts tribe. And although they were once one of the strongest tribes around the whole New England region, their language and their culture has since gone extinct. And I guarantee you that simply as long as you search and as long as you look, you will find dead and dying languages all around us. Now, as more and more of our languages go to death, we have to start to worry about the cultural, linguistic, and historical beauty of our human society. What I'm asking of you today is not necessarily to go start a fund, to donate money, or to take up a new endangered language on Duolingo. Although that would be pretty cool. Yeah. I don't know what that was. Unlike many other issues, linguistic death is a problem that not many people know about. Attention and awareness, therefore, is the first step to save our languages. As we depart SRA and RMP to our hometowns, I encourage all to take a strong look around them and see the dead and dying languages all around us. Go spend a day with the locals, perhaps, and learn their culture. Ultimately, no one wants to live in a world where everyone is the same, where individuality and diversity has been subsumed by monotony. Knowing about a language is the first step to saving the issue as a whole. And with that awareness, we can work together, not as distinct cultures, but as a shared humanity to permanently restore of our original Cornish beauty. Thank you, or in the endangered Cornish language, Duganis.